Professor Cathorax adjusted his third eye lens and gazed out at the sea of bored faces in his Xenobiology 101 lecture hall. Another semester, another batch of know-it-all students who thought they understood the complexities of the galaxy's most dangerous planets. He'd been teaching at Galactic University for over 30 cycles now, and every single term was the same story. Some hotshot warrior-class student would challenge his assertions about the death world known as Earth. "Today's lecture," he announced, his vocal sacs vibrating with barely contained excitement, "will cover Class 13 death worlds with a special focus on the most fascinating example in our local cluster. Sol 3, commonly known as Earth." The usual murmur of disbelief rippled through the classroom, right on schedule. "But Professor," called out a voice from the back row, "my father says Earth is just a primitive backwater. They haven't even colonized their own solar system yet." Cathorax's membrane-covered teeth stretched into what humans would recognize as a smile, though to his students it probably looked more like a grimace. The voice belonged to Verax, a warrior-class student from the militaristic Krakon Empire. The young alien sat in his reinforced seat, his chrome-plated exoskeleton gleaming under the quantum lights, 4 arms crossed in what Cathorax had come to recognize as the universal gesture for "I know better than you." "Ah, Verax," Cathorax said, pulling up a hollow projection of Earth's various life forms. "Tell me, what's the strongest natural armor in your empire's military?" Verax straightened up, his head crest extending with pride. "The Krakon battle shell, of course. It can withstand direct hits from plasma cannons and is completely impervious to most known toxins." "Fascinating," Cathorax replied, zooming in on a particular image. "And would you be surprised to learn that there are creatures on Earth smaller than your central eye that can produce toxins capable of dissolving that armor in minutes?" The classroom erupted in skeptical chittering and clicking sounds. Verax's head crest deflated slightly, but his posture remained defiant. "With all due respect, Professor, that's impossible. Our scientists have studied Earth's primitive weapons. They're still using projectile technology and crude atomic devices." Cathorax enlarged the image further, revealing a close-up of a seemingly innocuous spider. "Students, meet one of Earth's most efficient killers, the Sydney funnel web spider, and before you dismiss it, remember this. Earth evolved under conditions that would be considered apocalyptic on most worlds. Their gravity is crushing, their atmosphere is corrosive, and their biosphere is locked in a constant chemical arms race that has produced some of the most potent organic compounds in known space." He noticed several students discreetly activating their personal shield generators just from looking at the image. Good. At least some of them were developing appropriate caution. "But sir," Verax persisted, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for those who think they're about to win an argument, "if Earth is so dangerous, why isn't it quarantined? Why do we even allow exchange students from there?" As if on cue, the classroom door slid open with a soft hiss. A human walked in carrying what appeared to be a hot beverage in a container marked, "Coffee. Yes, it's my 4th one today. No, I don't have a problem." "Ah, speaking of Earth students," Cathorax said, his voice filled with theatrical timing, "everyone, please welcome Max Thompson, who will be assisting us this semester with our practical demonstrations." The human gave a casual wave, seemingly oblivious to the way several students recoiled at the gesture. Cathorax couldn't blame them. The sight of those 5-fingered hands with their devastating grip strength was enough to make anyone nervous. "Now then," Cathorax continued, his teaching membrane quivering with anticipation, "who's ready to learn why Earth's biology department is located in a reinforced bunker 5 levels below ground?" Verax's secondary hearts were pumping with indignation. He wasn't about to let some glorified data pusher tell him, a scion of the mighty Krakon Empire, that he should be afraid of a planet full of squishy bipeds and their even squishier wildlife. Standing up to his full 3-meter height, his exoskeleton plates clicking with the motion, he made his challenge. "Professor Cathorax, I formally dispute your classification of Earth as a Class 13 death world. Under Article 7 of the Galactic University Charter, I demand practical proof of your claims." The professor's third eye twinkled in a way that should have sent warning signals to Varax's threat assessment glands. Interesting proposal, student Varax. And how would you suggest we provide this practical proof? A field trip, Varax declared, his head crest now fully extended in challenge mode. To this supposedly dangerous Earth location you mentioned. The Australian outback, was it? A collective gasp rippled through the classroom. Even the floating gas cloud students condensed slightly in shock. The human, Max, who had been sipping their coffee substance, actually sprayed it across 3 desks. Hold up, Max interjected, wiping coffee from their face. You want to take a field trip to Australia? Have you all completely lost your minds? Professor Cuthorax raised all 3 of his appendages in a calming gesture. Now, Max, as an accredited arachnologist, surely you appreciate the educational value of such an expedition. Max's eyes widened. I'm sorry, did you just say I'm a what now? An arachnologist, Cuthorax continued smoothly. It's right here in your exchange student file. How fortunate that we'll have an expert in Earth's most fascinating creatures to guide us. There seems to be a slight misunderstanding, Max began, but Varax cut them off. Then it's settled. I will prove that my crack-on battle shell can withstand anything your pitiful Earth creatures can produce. When shall we depart? Cuthorax's membrane-covered teeth stretched into that unsettling smile again. University regulations require at least 3 solar cycles for field trip preparation. I suggest you all use that time to update your medical insurance and ensure your next-of-kin documentation is in order. The class spent the next 3 cycles in a flurry of preparation. Varax commissioned additional reinforcement for his already formidable battle armor, boasting loudly about its enhanced capabilities to anyone who would listen and many who wouldn't. The floating gas cloud students invested in premium containment fields. One particularly paranoid Xylaxian student even tried to hire a mercenary escort, until Cuthorax gently reminded them that bringing unauthorized weapons to Earth was a violation of 17 different treaties. Max, meanwhile, spent the time trying desperately to convince everyone this was a terrible idea. Look, they explained to a group of students in the cafeteria, you don't understand. Australia isn't just dangerous, it's Australian dangerous. That's like regular dangerous, but wearing shorts and actively trying to kill you while calling you mate. Nobody seemed to pay much attention to these warnings. After all, what could a mere human know about real danger? Several students even pointed out that Max's obvious fear was proof of their species' primitive nature. The day of departure arrived with all the subtlety of a quantum explosion. The class gathered in the university's teleportation chamber, looking like they were preparing for war rather than a field trip. Varax stood at the front of the group, his enhanced battle armor gleaming, all 4 arms holding different scanning devices. Remember, Professor Cuthorax announced as they prepared for teleportation, we're being granted special access to a restricted area of the Australian outback. The Earth authorities have been informed of our presence and there's a fully staffed medical facility on standby. Isn't that reassuring? Why do we need a medical facility? Asked a nervous-looking student from the back. Oh, no reason, Cuthorax replied cheerfully. Just standard procedure when visiting Class 13 Deathworlds. Now, is everyone wearing their emergency beacon? Excellent. Max, would you do the honors of programming our destination coordinates? Max looked at the teleportation console, then at the professor, then back at the console. You know what? Fine. But I want it noted for the record that this is the worst idea since humans invented milk chocolate for dogs. Noted, Cuthorax said. Now then, class, who's ready for some practical education? As the teleportation field hummed to life, Varax struck what he thought was a heroic pose. There's nothing in this Australia that can possibly threaten a crack-on warrior. This will be the easiest field trip in galactic history. The last thing the class heard before the teleportation beam engaged was Max muttering, "Famous last words, mate. Famous last words." The Australian outback materialized around them in a shimmer of quantum particles and regret. The class's first collective action upon arrival was to collapse under Earth's crushing gravity. All except Varax. who merely stumbled slightly, his enhanced battle armor compensating for the increased force. "By the seven suns," wheezed a Xylaxian student, their crystalline structure creaking ominously. "How do humans live like this?" "Oh, this," Max said cheerfully, breathing the corrosive oxygen atmosphere like it was nothing. "This is nothing. You should try Earth's oceans. Now there's some proper pressure for you." Professor Cathorax activated his anti-gravity assist just enough to maintain his dignity. "Students, please take note of your immediate physiological responses. This, mere seconds after arrival, is why Earth is classified as a Class 13 death world, and we haven't even encountered any of the local wildlife yet." As if on cue, a kangaroo bounded past in the distance. 3 students immediately activated their personal shield generators. One of the gas cloud beings condensed into a panic sphere. Varax, however, scoffed at their reactions. "That bouncing creature, please, my armor's sensors indicate it's not even armed." Max pinched the bridge of their nose. "Right, because on Earth, creatures need to be armed to be dangerous. Just wait until you meet a cassowary." "A what?" "Never mind, let's just focus on finding your spider and getting this over with." The class spread out across the designated search area, their various scanning devices humming and beeping in the hot Australian sun. Varax strutted around like he owned the place, occasionally firing up his armor's cooling systems when the temperature exceeded his comfort range. "This is what you call harsh conditions?" he boasted, all 4 arms gesturing at the landscape. "My home world's average temperature is twice this." "Fascinating," Cathorax noted, recording everything on his datapad. "And how many of your world's native species actively secrete neurotoxins?" "Well, none, but—" "And how many can kill you just by brushing against your skin?" "That's not really—" "And do any of them actively seek out confrontation with beings several thousand times their size?" Varax's head crest drooped slightly. "No, but surely—" He was interrupted by a blood-curdling scream from one of his classmates. Everyone rushed over to find a Meridian student pointing frantically at what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary patch of ground. Something moved, something small and brown, and it had more legs than any sane creature should possess. Max wandered over and glanced at the spot. "Oh, that's just a huntsman spider. They're basically harmless. Well, unless you're driving and one drops onto your face from the sun visor, then they can kill you, but only indirectly through the resulting car crash." The entire class took 3 synchronized steps backward. Varax, determined to maintain his reputation, stepped forward instead. "You call that a spider? It's not even the size of my auxiliary power core. Watch this." Before anyone could stop him, Varax activated his armor's enhancement field and brought one of his armored feet down on the spot where the spider had been. The resulting impact left a small crater in the Australian soil. "There, now who's the dangerous one?" Max and Professor Cathorax exchanged a knowing look. "Varax," the professor said calmly, "would you please activate your armor's microscopic threat detection system and scan that crater?" "Why, I clearly eliminated the—" "Oh." Varax's voice trailed off as his sensors revealed not one, but dozens of smaller spiders scurrying away from the impact site. That's not supposed to happen." "Welcome to Earth," Max said with a grim smile, "where everything has backup plans for its backup plans, and death comes in fun-sized packages." The class huddled closer together as they continued their search, every scanning device now set to maximum sensitivity. Even Varax seemed less enthusiastic about demonstrating his armor's capabilities. "Professor," he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, "exactly how small did you say that funnel-web spider was?" Cathorax consulted his datapad. "Oh, about the size of your smallest finger joint. Why do you ask?" Varax looked down at his armor's threat detection display, which was now lighting up like a celebration during the Galactic Concordat. "No reason," he said weakly. "No reason at all." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the class was about to learn that on Earth, it's not the threats you can see that you need to worry about. It's the ones that are waiting for you to get just a little bit closer. It happened during what Max later described as peak spider hour, That lovely time of day when the Australian sun had heated the ground just enough to make every venomous creature feel particularly enthusiastic about life. The class had spread out again, but not too far. They'd learned that lesson after the huntsman incident. Varax was leading the way, his battle armor's sensors sweeping the ground in increasingly erratic patterns as the number of small, scuttling life-forms began to overwhelm its detection systems. "This is ridiculous," he declared, though his head crest was notably less extended than it had been that morning. "These readings must be wrong. My sensors are showing thousands of potential threats within a 50-meter radius." "Oh, the sensors are working fine," Max said, casually stepping over what looked like a perfectly innocent patch of ground. "That's just how many things in this area want to kill you. Did you know that even some of our caterpillars are venomous? We've got poisonous trees too. The trees, they just sit there, waiting for someone to touch them." A Meridian student who had been leaning against a nearby tree jumped away with a yelp. "Different type of tree," Max assured them. "Probably." Professor Cathorax was having the time of his life, his datapad practically smoking from the speed of his note-taking. Fascinating. The sheer density of lethal organisms in this ecosystem is unprecedented. Students, please observe how even the seemingly empty spaces between visible threats are actually— "Found one!" The shout came from Varax, who was crouched over a small hole in the ground. His armor's enhancement field was active, magnifying his view of what appeared to be a simple spiderweb around the entrance. "This is it, isn't it? The funnel web spider's home? Ha! Look how small it is. My armor's environmental seals can easily—" "Varax," Max interrupted, suddenly very still. "I need you to back away from that hole. Very slowly." "Why, my battle shell can—" "Now, you chrome-plated idiot!" But it was too late. The spider, apparently deciding that the large, noisy creature blocking its front door was simply too annoying to ignore, emerged from its lair with all the fury that millions of years of evolution had packed into its tiny frame. What happened next would later be described in 17 different ways in the student reports, each account more terrifying than the last. The floating gas cloud students would claim the spider moved faster than their sensor arrays could track. The Xylaxian students' crystalline structure would resonate for days afterward at the mere memory of it. The spider, displaying the casual disregard for physics that Earth creatures are known for, launched itself directly at a gap in Varax's armor, a gap that was approximately 1/10 the size of the spider itself. "Ha!" Varax laughed triumphantly. "It can't possibly—" The spider somehow squeezed through anyway. There was a moment of perfect silence. Then Varax, mighty warrior of the Krakon Empire, wearer of the most advanced battle armor in the known galaxy, did something that no one in the class would ever forget. He screamed. Not just any scream, this was the kind of scream that made the earlier blood-curdling one sound like a gentle lullaby. This was a scream that said, "I have made a terrible mistake, and now I am experiencing the consequences in excruciating detail." The spider, having successfully navigated the gap in Varax's armor, did what funnel web spiders do best. It bit him. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Varax's battle armor, designed to withstand plasma cannons and resist most known toxins, began to smoke. The spider's venom, combining with his natural biochemistry, created a reaction that the professor would later describe as explosively educational. "Professor!" Varax wailed, his voice rising several octaves as his armor's emergency systems blared warnings in 6 different languages. "It's dissolving my secondary carapace." "Excellent observation," Cathorax exclaimed, still taking notes. "Students, please note the speed at which Earth-based neurotoxins can overcome even advanced defensive systems. The changing color of Varax's exoskeleton is particularly instructive." Max, being the only one with any sense of urgency and significant experience with spider bites, was already activating their emergency beacon. "Medical team to our coordinates now, and tell them it's a funnel web bite. Yes, another one. No, I don't know why they keep letting tourists come here either." As Varax collapsed into a twitching heap of compromised armor and wounded pride, the rest of the class finally understood why Earth was classified as a Class 13 death world. It wasn't because of any obvious threats or overwhelming forces. It was because on Earth even the smallest creatures had spent millions of years perfecting the art of saying, "Fight me," to the universe at large, and winning. The Sydney Interspecies Emergency Medical Centre had seen its fair share of unusual cases, but even the veteran staff had to admit that a crack-on warrior being rushed in with a compromised battle shell and rapidly dissolving exoskeleton was a new one. "Let me get this straight," the head physician Dr. Reynolds said while reviewing Varax's readings. "He deliberately antagonized a funnel web spider?" In his defense, Max offered, watching through the observation window as a team of human and alien medical staff worked on their classmate. He didn't think it could hurt him. Nobody ever does. First time on Earth. The medical bay was a flurry of activity. Varax's armor had to be carefully removed piece by piece, revealing the extent of the spider's handiwork. His mighty crack-on battle shell, pride of his empire's military technology, looked like it had been dipped in acid, which, as Professor Cathorax was eagerly explaining to the stunned class, wasn't far from the truth. "You see, students, this is why Earth's biology is so fascinating. The funnel web spider's venom isn't just a simple toxin. It's a complex cocktail of compounds that evolved to overcome any possible defense mechanism. When combined with the unique biochemistry of our friend Varax here, it created an unexpected but thoroughly educational reaction." "Professor," one of the gas cloud students ventured, "are you still recording?" "Of course, this is unprecedented data. The way his secondary carapace changed colors before starting to bubble, simply remarkable." From his hospital bed, Varax managed a weak growl. "I can hear you, Professor." A team of alien medical students had joined the observation group, their various sensory organs wide with fascination, as Dr. Reynolds explained the treatment protocol. "The challenging part isn't just neutralizing the venom," she said, pointing to a holographic display of Varax's biology. "It's dealing with all the cascading reactions. The spider's venom triggered a defense mechanism in his armor, which reacted with his natural biochemistry, which then created an entirely new compound that started dissolving his exoskeleton. We're basically doing chemistry in reverse here." Max, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "So, Varax, remember when you said Earth creatures weren't armed?" "Not now, human," Varax groaned. His head crest, now a fascinating shade of purple, had deflated to half its normal size. "Because technically you were right, they're not armed, they're walking chemical weapons factories. That spider, it's not even in our top 10 most venomous species. It's just the one that really, really likes picking fights." The class had pulled out their data pads and was furiously taking notes. Even the Xylaxian student, who had been maintaining a personal shield generator at maximum power since arrival, was recording everything. "Professor," another student asked, "is it true what the human says about this not being their most dangerous spider?" Cathorax's third eye gleamed. "Oh, indeed. Would you like me to show you some data on the Australian box jellyfish? Or perhaps the blue-ringed octopus? Both are fascinating examples of how Earth's oceans are even more lethal than its land masses." "No!" the entire class shouted in unison. Dr. Reynolds checked Varax's latest readings. "Well, the good news is you'll make a full recovery. The bad news is you'll need to stay here for observation for at least a week. Earth toxins can be persistent." "A week?" Varax's voice carried a note of panic. But what if something else gets in? The hospital's environmental seals are designed to Earth standards," Dr. Reynolds assured him, "which means they can keep out everything from microscopic parasites to determined kangaroos. You'd be amazed how often we have to test those specifications." Professor Cathorax was practically vibrating with academic excitement. "Dr. Reynolds, would you be willing to share your hospital's incident records? For educational purposes, of course. The statistical analysis of Earth-based medical emergencies would make an excellent addition to our curriculum." "Absolutely not," Max interjected. "The last thing we need is you giving the class more ideas about Earth's wildlife. Besides, Varax here has already provided enough material for an entire semester's worth of what not to do lectures. From his hospital bed, Varax could only groan in agreement. His mighty battle armor, or what was left of it, had been placed in a containment field for later study. The small spider that had caused all this chaos was probably already back in its hole, ready to defend its territory against the next overconfident visitor. As the class prepared to return to Galactic University, leaving Varax in the capable hands of Earth's medical professionals, one timid student raised an appendage. "Professor, I have just one question." "Yes? Can we do our next field trip somewhere less dangerous, like maybe an active supernova?" 1 week later, back at Galactic University, Professor Cathorax's Xenobiology 101 class had undergone some notable changes. For one thing, attendance was perfect. No one dared miss a lesson after what they'd witnessed. For another, the students had developed an almost pathological attention to detail when it came to studying Earth's biology. Varax had finally returned, his new battle armor featuring significantly improved environmental seals and what appeared to be several dozen additional layers of protection. His head crest, while fully healed, now tended to flatten automatically at any mention of Earth wildlife. "And that, students," Cathorax was saying, concluding his presentation on the field trip data, "is why proper research and respect for alien ecosystems is crucial for xenobiologists. Now, who can tell me the primary lesson learned from our practical demonstration?" Every appendage, tentacle, and sensory organ in the room shot up. "Never underestimate Earth life forms," they chorused in perfect unison. "Excellent, and why is that?" "Because 4 billion years of evolutionary arms race means everything there is trying to kill everything else," they recited. "And they're really, really good at it." Varax, who had become something of a reluctant expert on Earth's medical facilities, raised one of his 4 arms. "Professor, I've been doing some additional research. Did you know their medical database includes treatment protocols for over 10,000 different types of venom and toxins, and that's just from their native species?" "Very good, Varax. I see your unexpected extended stay on Earth has given you a new appreciation for their biological diversity. Would you care to share your hospital observations with the class?" "I'd rather not," Varax muttered, his new armor whirring as its threat detection system scanned the room for the 100th time that day. "But I will say this. I now understand why humans are the way they are. When you evolve on a planet where everything is constantly trying to kill you in increasingly creative ways, you either develop a very robust medical science or you don't survive long enough to leave the planet." Max, who had been quietly enjoying their 5th coffee of the day, gave Varax an approving nod. "Sounds like someone learned something after all." "Indeed," Cathorax exclaimed. "Which brings me to our next topic. Max, would you care to share your expertise about Earth's marine biology? I believe you mentioned something about box jellyfish." The entire class flinched. "Actually, Professor," Max said, standing up with a grin that made several students activate their shield generators, "I have a confession to make. I'm not really an arachnologist." "Oh," Cathorax's third eye focused intently. "Nope, I'm a marine biologist. Specifically, I study cone snails. You know those beautiful shells that can inject you with enough neurotoxins to kill 20 humans before you even realize you've been stung?" The sound of several personal shield generators being turned up to maximum filled the room. "And I've brought some specimens for next week's practical demonstration." Varax's new battle armor immediately initiated its emergency teleportation sequence, but not before everyone heard his dignified warrior's scream fading into the distance. Professor Cathorax watched his star student's hasty departure with all 3 eyes gleaming. "Excellent timing, Max. Now, class, please note how the mere threat of encountering another Earth species triggered a flight response in our previously overconfident colleague. This is exactly the kind of healthy respect for Earth's biodiversity I've been trying to instill." As the rest of the class edged nervously toward the exits, Max pulled out a small container. "Don't worry, they're just shells. The snails themselves are safely back on Earth. Though I should mention, one of them did escape during transport. The lecture hall cleared so quickly it set a new Galactic University record. "Same time next week?" Max called after the retreating students. "I'm thinking of doing a presentation on blue-ringed octopi." Professor Cathorax's membrane-covered teeth stretched into that familiar smile. "Max, I believe this is the beginning of a beautiful academic collaboration." "Thanks, Professor. Though I do feel a bit bad about Varax. Should we tell him the shells are just for show?" "Eventually," Cathorax said, already planning next semester's curriculum. "But perhaps after he submits his thesis on survival strategies for Class 13 Deathworld encounters. I hear he's become quite passionate about the subject since his practical experience. Somewhere in the distance, Varax's battle armor was probably still scanning for cone snails. But that's the thing about studying Earth's wildlife. It's not paranoia if everything really is out to get you." And somewhere in the Australian outback, a small spider was probably telling its friends about the time it took down a warrior 3,000 times its size. Though, being Australian, it would have ended the story with "No worries, mate, he was asking for it."